The spring semester is here, and that means baseball season is just about to kick off. On deck, that means it's back. We got the first episode right here on Q30 Sports. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 1 of On Deck of the Year. I'm Anthony Rossi alongside Becca Calkins, and we're here to preview the 2024 baseball season for the Quinnipiac baseball team. Beckett, how are we feeling today?
I mean, excited, right? We get to talk about baseball in one of the most exciting upcoming seasons on the diamond that Quinnipiac's really ever had. A new field, Rossi, a lot of important things to talk about. Let's get right into it.
All right, let's do just so. So we got some MAAC highlights from last year's playoffs. Let's take a look at them right now as it's Fairfield and Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac ended up losing this game. They were one game away from the MAAC championship. Fairfield dominated this entire game 12-4. Beckett, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, Fairfield's a powerhouse, right? And they did end up going on to lose in that eventual MAAC championship. But the Bobcats against Fairfield, just one game away, right? If they won this game, they're one game away from that MAAC championship berth appearance in the finals there. So you never know what can happen in baseball. Take it one game at a time. But overall, the Bobcats have been improving steadily. And last year, one of the best seasons in program history, now trying to build off that.
Yeah, and there were a lot of players that dominated last year, like Griffin Watson. He was pretty good. Noah Lucifer. That team was really stacked, and they could have some returners this year that could name them MAAC favorites this year.
Yeah, I mean, Fairfield, they're certainly going to be strong again, but then you flip it back to Quinnipiac, right? They have some key losses as well. I know we'll talk about the additions in a little bit, but Rossi, what do you know about the guys that kind of departed Quinnipiac, and how are they going to fill those shoes?
Well, we'll pull up the list right now. So the ins and outs. First, let's take a look at the outs. One of them is Kyle Maves, and that's a huge loss. You lose your second baseman, and he was definitely one of the biggest guys in this team. Anthony D'Onofrio, the guy that's highlighted there, just transferred to UNC. He's looking to do some great things out in the ACC. Kevin Cedar, I mean, he was their ace. He was their guy. McGuire Tuffy out, he transferred to Georgia Tech. And a couple of other key guys were out in the pitching that I know that Ben and Aaron will talk about later. But Anthony D'Onofrio is such a key loss, and especially going to the ACC with UNC, he's going to thrive out there. Kevin Sider, we're not really sure what's going to happen with him right now. He's currently not listed on the roster for Oregon, but he has transferred there, so not sure if we're going to see him in Oregon or not. But he was such a good ace here at Quinnipiac, and that's a major loss in the pitching category.
So there's definitely some losses, but they have to fill those shoes somehow, and let's take a look at how they're going to do that and who's being added to this Bobcat squad, especially in the lineup. So a lot of names coming in, but there's a few that jump out to me right away. I know Gabe Wright. How about that? Right away, Gabe Wright. A fantastic sophomore coming in for the Bobcats. This is a guy that's known Sean Swenson almost his whole life. Those two are good friends, childhood buddies, and Wright's a really strong defensive center fielder, got some speed. Some would consider him almost a 5-tool player. We'll see if that power can pop a little bit as well, but Gabe Wright, just one name to watch out for the Bobcats in terms of new additions. Another one, you mentioned Kyle Maves. Who's going to fill his shoes a little bit? How about Dominic Proctor? Proctor's probably going to play the shortstop position, trying to anchor that infield defense, but also a guy that can, run a little bit and hopefully hit for a little bit of contact as well. And who knows what Proctor has in store in his first season here in Hamden.
Yeah, like the new guys that have come in this year, especially in the batting order. It's going to be really interesting where these guys slot in, obviously with Mac Tuffy being gone, and then Matt Tessorier also graduating, which I didn't mention earlier. That team is going to look a little bit different, but time will tell.
Time will certainly tell. And it's not just, we've talked a little bit about some of the returns, but it's not just these new guys as well. We haven't mentioned Keegan O'Connor yet. I mean, one of the best catchers in the MAAC.
Ranked number 38 in D1 as well. So that guy's got some power behind him, and he's one of the best catchers in the MAAC too. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how the batting order lines up. But let's talk a little bit about the defense. Let's see that potential lineup from this year. Obviously, we see Jared Zimbardo out in the outfield. He's going to be one of the starters this year. Gabe Wright projected in center field. Braden Seaberg as well. Obviously, Keegan O'Connor is going to be behind the plate at catcher. But John Heitzman could be another guy that could be stepping up this year, playing a couple of minutes out in right field. Designated hitter. We could see some Sean Swenson action there, although he is one of the designated first basemen. Matt DeRosa looking to pick up the slack from Kyle Maves at second last year. Like you mentioned, Dominic Proctor at shortstop, and then Sebastian Muller at the third base position.
I'll go from there, right? Muller and Swenson. That's the corners of your infield. Two guys who have been here and two guys. What do you look for at your corner infield positions? You look for pop. You look for a little bit of power from that first base and third base position. So I know I'm going a little bit from defense back to offense here, but those two, fine, they do have to play defense. But look for some big-time power numbers out of Swenson and Muller this year. You mentioned the middle infield. DeRosa, that's one of the leaders. He's a captain on this Bobcats team. That's one of the leaders. He can play some defense, hit for average, run, and look for Proctor to fill that same type of role as well going into the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for DeRosa because he wasn't really in a big leadership role last year. He played a couple of games, started benching a couple, and he started and benched a couple of games, so he wasn't able to play to his full potential. But DeRosa being named a captain of this team is going to be really interesting going into the season. Obviously, you have that leadership like I was talking about with Jared Zimbardo. You got the youth of John Heitzman. So you will see how the outfield really adapts. Obviously, Jared Zimbardo, amazing defensively and offensively. Look at that catch. Look at that catch. That's what I was about to mention. But Zimbardo is definitely one of the best outfielders and players on this team. And he could really put some pop on the ball too, just as much as he can do in the outfield.
Yeah, I mean, and he's not the only one there in the outfield. I know we've talked about Gabe Wright a little bit, but I just want to go back to Gabe Wright. Let's take a look at what this guy is capable of. I mean, he's been unbelievable, and now coming in, he already has that chemistry, as we mentioned, with Sean Swenson, which, fine, it might not matter as much as other sports, like in terms of on-the-field play, chemistry-wise, but it can matter in the clubhouse. It can matter in a team. Look at this. This is a guy that can hit the baseball, and then center field, he can cover a ton of ground out there in the middle, in between Zimbardo and Seaberg out in the outfield. So look for Gabe Wright, look for Jared Zimbardo, and then Braden Seaberg. That is a strong outfield trio.
He's got a little bit of pop too. I mean, he showed it later in the year against like those weaker teams of like Hartford and a couple of the MAAC games. But he had some pop on the ball too. He had a couple of home runs, a couple of triples. He's definitely one of those speedy guys.
Yeah, for sure. And Rossi, we've mentioned pretty much this entire lineup. Let's go to the DH position. I mean, sure, they don't necessarily have to play the field, but Christopher Willis, that's another name coming to this Bobcats squad that is projected in our projections to start at the designated hitter spot for the Bobcats. Another potential big-time impact bat.
Well, it's really interesting, too, because we knew last year it was either Swenson or it was going to be Muller because you didn't know what was going to happen there. Because DeRosa could play third because he was out there because Maves didn't really play, and then Tesoriero would rotate in as well. But now you have this guy who's going to come in possibly as a third designated hitter, maybe giving Muller or Swenson a little bit of a day off of the infield. But this guy can have some pop on the ball too, so I'm interested to see how Willis does with this new team.
Yeah, and then going back, one more piece that I do want to talk about. I know you've mentioned him a little bit, John Heitzman. This guy played in 30 games last year, started 25. So, about half the games he played in last year, and kind of up and down season for Heitzman. Overall, he ended up hitting .237 and scored 16 runs, 22 hits. So, decent backup, lineup numbers. But let's see, do you think that's a guy who could potentially take a leap forward in this year for the Bobcats?
I think that Heitzman is definitely going to take a leap forward. He could get some rotating in that second role behind Seaberg, because if Seaberg has a couple of off days, we definitely saw Heitzman hop into the lineup later in the year. But Heitzman is one of those guys, he'll be one of those key players moving into the later part of the year where Seaberg or Zimbardo will get a little bit tired, maybe Gabe Wright will get a little bit tired, and he'll be that guy that'll back them up. I think we've done a lot of talking about the batting circle and the clubhouse. Well, let's talk about the pitching mound. We'll send that over to Aaron and Ben.
Thank you, Beckett and Anthony. I'm Ben Rikovicius, joined alongside Aaron Epstein. We're going to break down the Quinnipiac pitching staff. We got some great insight right there about the hitters. We got to hear about the pitchers now, the guys on the bump. And I think, Aaron, we got to start with the big departure. Kevin Sider leaves, transfers to Oregon. We're going to see some of the tape now here, but this guy was a workhorse for Quinnipiac, and he had a team best ERA of 3.58, 8-4 record, 88 innings pitched. They are going to miss this guy. He was consistent, got great strikeout stuff, and really helped Quinnipiac build their momentum up last year.
So how are you going to replace that then, right? How?
Yeah, you got to bring in new guys to see it. So let's take a look at some of our top 10 pitchers here that we got projected for the season here. I think one of those guys that is going to help him out a ton is Brett Layton, a transfer from D3 Gettysburg College here. I got him projected as the second best pitcher. I think a big breakout season for him is on the way. I think you're going to see him alongside Jimmy Hagan coming back from injury, playing a big role here. You get a look at all those names. At the bottom, you notice a little subtext that says they had the third best ERA in the MAAC last year. And really for Quinnipiac, a big issue for them the last few years, Aaron, has been the pitching. How do you get it better? Last season, not too bad. MAAC is a notorious league for having tough pitching, and hitters really hit those pitchers well. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of bolster that up and get more stable with it. But I know you got some prep here yourself on some of the relievers, so why don't we dive right into them?
Yeah, so that was cool. We started with the starters, but now we're going to end with the bullpen.
Yeah.
So the first guy on my list, Matt Alduino, he was a first year last year, had a 3.37 ERA. Sure, it was only 2 appearances, but you only build from there, especially getting into the game, getting into the groove as a first year. Now moving into his sophomore season, he's really going to take the next step, I think. Another guy that I've been watching, Mike Puncini. He was slated to be the closer to start last season. As a first year, a closer.
Yeah. Played
Played his first game, had 1 appearance, got the save, pitched a perfect inning, and then got hurt and missed the rest of the year. So I think seeing him in year 2, when they already knew he was going to be their arguably best reliever as their closer, he could have a special season. And then I'm going to end it off with Skylar Menelski, right? You were talking about him earlier. His sidearm, he's a sidearm, a little freaky, but you know what? I'm excited to watch it. He's a transfer, and in 2022, last year he had a bit of a down year, didn't play very much, but in 2022 he did 2.22 ERA over 22 appearances, and his opponents hit 186. If he can take that over here, that's a great 3-headed trio to lead this bullpen.
Yeah, kind of following up on Minalski here, we see some of the footage right there getting finished, but that sidearm, it's funky. It's a different release point, and something Coach Delaney preached last year was being able to read pitchers with different release points, and you want that in your tool bag of weapons. And I mean, we're not saying this guy's going to, come in here and be the closer for Quinnipiac. I don't think that's the expectation that he should be landing right now, but as a guy who can maybe eat some innings, 6th, 7th innings, close game, 1, 2, 3-run game, you're trying to stay in that inning and, booster some confidence in that bullpen. I think he's a guy who could have a great season. I know you talked about Matt Alduino. I think there's so much to really talk about him. Fiery stuff, explosive fastball, and I think he's a guy, made all rookie team for the MAAC last year. I think he's a guy who can have a great sophomore season. And we can just go back to Brett Layton maybe for a second, because I've been watching so much Brett Layton footage, and I just absolutely love what I've seen so far. Fastball touching around 88, 92. Check a look at this slider. Ooh, look at that. Really explosive stuff, and he's got great command of the zone. And yeah, okay, he's transferring from D3 Gettysburg. But I think this is a guy, he's a grad, he's got the experience. Okay, I'm stepping in the bat, I'm scared to face that. I think he's got great stuff. I think he could be a projected 3-2 starter, depending on how things come up, because obviously Coach Delaney has said those 3 starters that he kind of has for the weekends, they change over the year. They're not going to be the same guys you have in the fall ball, not going to be the same guys that start the season, not going to be the same 3 guys that are closing out in the MAAC playoffs. But I think that is a guy who you could look to maybe even get some good starts. And I think towards the end of the year, he's going to evolve and determine himself as a quality starter.
You know what I noticed in his tape? He uses every part of the strike zone. He got that here, getting up. He got that curveball in the dirt. You really need a guy who can get anyone out in all the 4 quadrants.
Exactly. And really for them, strikeout stuff, the Quinnipiac pitching staff, it wasn't their strong suit. You got to get a guy like Kevin Sider shoving and doing a lot of great stuff on the mound for them and getting them a lot of great strikeouts. And okay, another guy they lost who graduated, Tim Blaisdell. He was a guy who was more of a ground ball pitcher. He ate up a ton of innings, though, Aaron. And really the big thing with him was, can you get the outs fast? He ran into problems with runs. He gave up a lot of runs, walks, issues, and that forced him to kind of be more of a bullpen guy on those bullpen days. He'd pitch maybe the 3rd to 6th innings and just eat innings for them. But obviously, even though he wasn't the best pitcher on their staff, it's still a loss. You need guys who can go out there, and yeah, sure, maybe they let up a few runs here and there, but you need guys for consistency.
I agree.
So I think that pretty much wraps a bow on most of the pitching stuff. And it's going to be a very big question mark, I think, to see how they perform with this new turf field that we haven't really even touched about too much. But I think it'll be interesting to see as they continue to evolve. And Assistant Coach Trey Stover has mentioned that pitching recruiting is a big focus for the Bobcats in the next few years. So with that, we're going to bring Anthony and Beckett back out and do a little 4 Beat Reporter segment here where we talk about our MAAC Player of the Year predictions and who's going to win it all. Can't wait to see what happens.
I'm excited.
All right, we're back. We have all 4 of us here now, and we're going to talk about our MAAC Player of the Year predictions. Ben, do you want to get us started?
Hey, I'm the vet here on this beat staff, so we'll kick it off. Let's take a look and see who we got here for players. I personally went with Byram Hott as my MAAC Player of the Year prediction. Had a great year with Marist last year, but Beckett, talk about your guy.
I mean, I'm going to Canisius Jackson Strong, number 22 up there in Buffalo. Junior outfielder, covers a lot of ground. Great in the field, great at the plate. Rossi.
Yeah, I'm talking about a guy that's great behind the plate, actually. It's Keegan O'Connor, the senior who was named All-MAC first team last year. Aaron, who you got?
I'm going over to Fairfield with Matt Bergevin. I just feel like he's going to take the next big step.
All right, should we do a little more in-depth analysis on Hott here?
Let's start with you,
All
Byram.
right, great. Let's talk about Byram Hott. So this is a guy who, yes, Marist struggled last year, didn't make the MAAC tournament, but a guy who was crushing it at the plate. Get a little footage here from him practicing just that approach at the plate. He hit .382 last year and had 191 at-bats, 73 hits, only 2 home runs. And I know we've talked about it a little bit. Power is important, yes, but I think it's a big power year coming up for him. I think he is going to help take this Marist team, very young, very promising, get them a place in that MAAC tournament, maybe do some damage.
So overall, Ben, numbers are great.
Yes.
Do you think that power surge could happen? Or because I think to win player, you got to have a little bit of pop.
I think we're looking at maybe in the 5 to 8 range for home runs for him. I don't think anything crazy. I don't think he's going to blow us away, but I think what he's going to do is he's going to lead the MAAC in average and a bunch of other statisticals like that. I mean, great fielder. He's a speed threat. I mean, what's not to love about him? Yes, the power slightly down, but he's got guys on his team who are going to produce.
I mean, Byram Hott's definitely one of the guys to look out for. Marist came to Quinnipiac, and he was one of the guys that I was looking at, and one of the guys that kind of stood out. Although he wasn't really an insane power hitter, he was one of those guys that was a good contact
Exactly.
hitter.
Becca, you want to talk about Strong some more?
Well, I mean, he's just a strong all-around player.
Sure.
This guy has 5 tools, and some people they just say 5-tool player, 5-tool player. He is a legit 5-tool player. Let me read you some numbers. A .365 batting average last year. Fantastic player. Started 41 games for Canisius. And this is a guy that ended up hitting 13 bombs, left the yard 13 times, 14 stolen bases. He can run as well. Just committed 2 errors in the field. I know he's an outfielder, so errors might not be the most accurate statistic for defensive outfielders, but also had 67 putouts out there in center field for Canisius. So this is a guy overall a fantastic all-around player and a guy who took a leap from his first year to that second year last year, looking for another huge leap this year.
Strong's a very good candidate. Ross, you want to talk about the hometown kid, Keegan O'Connor here?
I went a little bit underdog
Okay.
here. I mean, Keegan O'Connor is one of the guys that's pretty good. Number 38 catcher in the nation, like I mentioned earlier. His stats were pretty solid last year. 342 batting average. Couple of dingers, too. He's definitely one of the guys that can hit some bombs out of the yard. But he's one of those speedsters we see. Look at this triple right here, knocking in Braden Seaberg. He's a good guy at the plate. He's a good guy behind the mound, too. You got to get a little bit of versatility. He can swing the ball out to second base and throw out a couple of guys at second that are picking off. But All-MAC first team's got to mean something for this kid. He's such a solid player in his senior years where I think he takes that next big jump and will get there. Another guy that I want to mention is Scott Seeker. It was between either of those two. Seeker, definitely one of the main guys in Mount St. Mary's that we're going to be looking out for the rest of the year. All right, so enough about Seeker and O'Connor. Aaron, what do you got for us staying in Connecticut?
Okay, so you guys are all done, right?
Yes.
Cool. So, Becky, you want to help me out with some trivia? Who won the MAAC Player of the Year last year?
That was Charlie Pagliarlini of Fairfield.
Yes.
Correct. So now that he's transferred, no, he got drafted, right?
Yep.
He got drafted, so he's gone. So Fairfield's going to need someone to take his spot, right?
Yes.
How about Matt Bergevin? He was their second best player last year, most likely, right? So last year, as a junior, 5th in batting average in the MAAC, 4th in on base, 9th in OPS, and what's most important is his step from year 1 as a player, as a starter, to year 2. So as a sophomore, it was his first year playing. He did not play as a first year. So as a sophomore, compared to a junior, he jumped from a 264 average to a 363. That's a 99-point jump. He slugged 482 as a sophomore, slugged 588, over 100 points more as a junior. On base went up from 378 to 467. But you know what's most important to me? Something I always look at when I look at someone's year 2 jump, when they whatever whatever place they're at.
Yes.
What was his strikeout rate as a sophomore? 22.6%. Strikeout rate as a junior, 15.4%.
Cut it back
He
significantly.
cut that back so much, and that is something that's so important. His walk rate stayed about the same. He only had three less walks than strikeouts last season.
I mean, if you also want to talk about guys that have taken that next jump, look at Keegan O'Connor's year last year in 2023, slugging .601. What was that the year before? .412. Not that good. Batting average, too, took a huge leap. .342 last year. Year before that, .288. Apologies. But O'Connor, again, tanks. 3 the year prior. Last year, 13 tanks into the outfield with 60 RBIs to count him with it.
I think something that all of us have in common with our players is big jumps. And guys who have made the jump before, guys who last season were kind of in consideration for the MAAC Player of the Year, obviously. It was ran away with. But I think the big thing is we can expect all 4 of these guys, and 5 if we're counting Scott Seeker, all 5 of these guys to make massive jumps in their game this year.
For sure, for sure.
All right, should we get to the big stuff?
Let's do it. But Aaron, do you have something to say?
Let me just end it up with,
sure.
I mean, how great of a story would it be if another Fairfield player
Back to
took the
back.
place back to back?
Big Stags fan over there, aren't you?
No.
I think it does say something, though, if that does happen, and Fairfield has been on top of the MAAC for a while. Them and Ryder was back and forth this year.
I mean,
talking
they're
about
definitely one of the
Connecticut baseball.
favorites this year.
Of course. And
should we get to that?
That's a great
Yeah.
segue. That's a great segue.
Yeah.
So we picked our MAAC tournament. We did our MAAC tournament predictions and picked our championship game and who's winning. Let's see what we got here, guys. All right, first thing up, I will go here. Fairfield gets revenge for last year. They're going to beat the Quinnipiac Bobcats. And hey, that's a big jump. I mean, Bobcats were there last year, only 1 game away, but Beckett, you got Fairfield too.
Oh, I do have Fairfield. I think they're fantastic. Aaron, I do like your pick, but look who I have them over. Canisius, the Griffs.
That's insane.
No, that's not
That
insane
is
because
absolutely
Canisius,
crazy.
Jackson Strong is going to go beast mode
You
this
think
year.
that one guy is going to carry a team? Obviously, my prediction, I have Ryder over Fairfield. Fairfield's the favorites, but what a story it would be, Ryder back-to-back. That would be insane. And I know
That's
you
cool.
have Fairfield as well.
That's cool. I mean, who doesn't love a rematch? But you know what I love even more? A revenge.
The revenge story is good.
I got Fairfield over Ryder. Sure, Ryder's pitching had their way with Fairfield last year. Different team.
Big thing is, I think with Ryder, is a lot of their pitching left. And I think that's something they're going to have to find. They still have a lot of young, great players, and they're going to have to take big steps up, especially.
You're talking about pitching,
Yeah.
and that Ryder's pitching left. Look at Quinnipiac's
Hey.
pitching. Kevin Cedar left. Tim Blaisdell left. Why is Quinnipiac in the championship end?
I think just because Sider left, I mean, there are guys who can still step in. I mean, we were just talking about it. Me and Aaron were talking about later in that rotation.
relievers are solid. Matt Alduino's solid. Mike Poncini's solid. Where are the starters this
Jimmy
year?
Hagan's coming back from injury.
That's one guy, though.
Well, I just mentioned Leighton, Hagan. They find a third guy. They got a few options probably competing for that third spot. That's a solid 3
I'm not
rotation.
dissing Quinnipiac. I'm just saying they're not making the championship. They can definitely make a run if they can. I have Keegan O'Connor as my player of the year.
Another big thing is they retained a lot of those offensive players who had their best, one of Quinnipiac's best offensive seasons in program history. You lose a few guys, and I'm not discrediting the importance of D'Onofrio and Maves last year. Those were 2 guys, they're going to struggle a little bit in the beginning to find their way back. But when you're keeping guys like Zimbardo, Swenson, Mueller, you can just keep going down that list. I think that's super important. I think all of these teams that we've mentioned, top of the MAAC. They are the guys to watch out for.
Yep.
But I think, hey, does that pretty much do it here? Right?
I
think it does.
That
Yeah.
does
Thanks
it.
for us. All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode of On Deck. We'll be back next week to recap Quinnipiac's first series against Liberty. Stay tuned.